So as I was saying, I'm sure you guys have done it before. But we need to create a pose for this dude. And the way we do it, or can do it at least, one way that works is when you build a rig normally using Rigify, you create what's called a meta rig, which is basically just a bunch of locators for where the joints and positions of the actual rig need to be. And then you generate a rig from that meta rig. Okay. However, you can also potentially use that meta rig just as a pose rig. Okay, you can't animate with it, you can't do anything else with it. But if we were to envelope our characters to it, we can actually use that rig just to alter their pose a little bit. Okay, particularly so that if your character's arms are in a T pose, we can make it a little bit more appealing. Okay, so let's do that first quickly, and then we'll do the turnaround, and then we'll just go through the render layers again. Okay, so to do that, armature. Sorry, I'm lying. It probably needs to be activated. So if it's not on underneath yours, we just need to look for the Rigify. There we go. Add-on. Select it. It goes on. You say save preferences. Okay. Then when we say armature, what we want is this human meta rig. Okay. And you'll see that does that. Okay. It creates basically a whole crazy bunch of bones. Okay, which some of them we're going to delete, and we're going to use the rest. Okay, so the idea is that this isn't actually a animation rig at all. This isn't a rig at all. This is just a armature. So if you think about stop motion, we have an armature where it's just a wireframe, whatever. It's exactly the same here. Okay, so this isn't an animation rig. We can't animate with it, but we can put it into poses if we wanted. Okay. So first of all, I'm going to go into edit mode, and we need to try and adjust the proportions of this armature to match our character. Okay, so my character is a bit big, but don't worry too much about that. We can figure that out when we actually rig them properly next turn. Okay, so I'm going to scale it up in edit mode. It's important that you do it in edit mode so you actually move the bones and not just the size of the display of the rig. Okay, so I'm going to scale it up so it more or less matches in terms of the shoulders. Well, whichever. You see, so for this guy, if I match his hips over there, his shoulders are very small. If I match his shoulders, then the legs are very long. But let's just go with that. Okay, while you do this, if you go into the Active Tool Workspace Settings tab, just make sure you turn on X-axis mirror, okay, because then whatever you do over there, it will repeat on that side. Okay, so now very briefly, we quickly need to go and just match up the bones of the rig to our character. Okay, and again, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's literally just so we can manipulate it slightly. Okay, so whatever it is that we're going to do, this dude's knees over there. It's really just so that we can get a slightly more interesting pose in our character. Okay, so his knees are bending outward. Okay, so feet are also rotated a bit, so I'm just going to rotate those. Rotate from the median point and along the Z axis, something like that. Okay, so we're just trying to match up everything. I'm sure you guys have used this kind of thing before. That whole thing I'm just going to pull down. Okay, so we can more or less match his hips up to where they should be. And these also, I'm just moving these, I'm pressing G and Z so that I move them along the actual axes and not just randomly. Okay, so there. Okay, I know this last bone is basically his rib cage bone, so that should be more or less where his solar plexus is, and that in between somewhere over there. Okay, it's fine for now. Okay, then the whole arm, I'm going to select it like that and move it to where I expect the shoulder joint is. And more or less what I do is, if you follow the curve of the body over here and go up along that curve, and then like dissect the shoulder in the middle more or less, that's generally where I put that. So somewhere over there should be fine. Maybe a little bit more out. Maybe a bit further out. Okay. Again, this is just to create a pose. Okay, and this would be his scapula, I think, more or less. Just that. Those, I'm then going to rotate from the 3D cursor down over there. That didn't do it. cursor, and then scale them up till the hands kind of match. Okay, and then I'm going to my top view, which is 7. Don't mind my spheres. Move all of this backward. Who was that? Back in edit mode, Z, Y, there we go. Because I'm not even going to bother about the hands. Okay, I don't want to pose his fingers. I think his hands are neutral enough for the turnaround. Okay, so I'm really not going to worry about that. It's really just to move his arms and potentially his legs if you really want to. But you guys will see when we do it, it's really just a bit of a... Okay, and all these face bones, I'm going to delete. Delete the bones. I only want the head bone. Okay, so those, I don't think we're even going to use them when we animate. Okay, and then top of the head. This is technically speaking his neck, which this guy doesn't really have much of. So let's just do that potentially. And that, more or less, should be fine. Okay, so then just push his hips back into his actual body. There. Okay, so as we're saying, that should be more or less fine. Okay, now where we were rigging, we'd actually go and generate the rig from this. We're just going to use this as it is. Okay, so what you would do with your actual character selected and everything, we go and link it to the actual object. But we do have time. So I'm quickly going to show you just a few last things that we need to do with our characters themselves, okay, before we go on with that. Okay, so I'm just going to isolate the character as well as my eyeballs. Okay, so there is my character. Now, a lot of you still have your, there are a few things. We need to apply a mirror modifier, first of all. Obviously, and then also we need to make a shape to open up the eyes of the character. So I'm just going to show you quickly what to do. Okay. I hope, I'm not sure if you did or not. Is there anyone who has a multi-race modifier on their character, actually sculpted on them afterwards? A little bit. Okay, cool. We'll just have to see that we don't lose that. Okay. However, okay, let me just show you where a lot of you guys may be at this point. Okay, think of it this way. Okay, what may have happened is if you have already created a shape to open up your eyes and you have a mirror modifier on your character, okay, you can't then go and apply your mirror modifier. Okay, so the reason for that is you can't apply a modifier on a mesh that has shapes on it. Okay, I don't know why. Probably makes sense if you go into the technicality of it, but there is a bit of a workaround for it. Okay, so I just want to show you what that workaround would be. So I'm going to delete half my character. Let's try and select as much of it as possible. Oh. Without selecting too much. Okay, so this isn't something that you would necessarily have to do. Okay, but come on. Okay, so there I've got exactly half my character. Okay, so if you had a mirror modifier on it, okay, and that would be over there somewhere. I'm just going to turn off my multi-rays for now, and that, okay. And if you, for instance, let me just delete that for now. Okay, and just put a normal subsurf on it. Okay, so there we go. So if you have your mirror modifier on, and you have shape keys over there. Okay, so you have a shape key that opens your eyes, okay, and you have a mirror modifier on. Once you want to apply your mirror modifier, you're going to try I'm just going to say you can't do it with shape with shape or a mesh with shapes. Okay, now the workaround to that is the following, I think, and I hope I get this right. Okay, so delete that and that. Okay, then what we need to do is basically we need to just link our shape key after we've applied our mirror modifier, if that makes sense. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete that modifier, and to duplicate my actual mesh. Okay, and then one of them, this one, the one in the middle, I'm going to delete the shape key off of. So I'm going to delete that shape key, and that's what it was like. Okay, and this one, I'm going to do it as well, but I'm going to delete the base first so that it keeps the shape key in it. Okay, so it's now that. Okay, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply my mirror modifier again to both of them. So if say mirror modifier, okay, and this one also a mirror modifier, we're going to apply them on both. Okay, so say apply there and apply there. Now, hopefully, what then happens is if you have that one and you go and shift select that one, hopefully the point IDs have stayed the same and this doesn't break, which if it does, whoops, we'll just have to remake the shape. But what you can then do is if you say here and you say there, and you say join as shape key, okay, what hopefully happens is that your mesh in the middle now has a new base and a new shape key called whatever this was called, there, body mesh 01, and it now has a shape key on it, which works fantastic. Okay, so that is your solution. Okay, anyway, then going back, I haven't actually gone through it with you guys. I've showed it to you in a video, but if you do need to make these shape keys, okay, so all the shape key does is opens his eyes. Okay, so don't worry for now that it's actually going through his eyeball. That's not too much of an issue. But basically how I go about doing it in edit mode, if you do this, let's make a new one. You just need to remember new shape key over there and call this eye open. Oops. Okay, eye open. So in edit mode, what you just need to be able to or be aware of is that you have your X mirror on. Okay, so in your, again, this first tool tab, X mirror must be on so that if we do anything over here, it does it on both sides. Okay, that's quite important. Okay, now how I go about doing this is with my connected on, okay, and I select the closest edge loop basically on the upper and lower lid, and I move that edge up. Okay, and I basically unshape it like this. Okay, so if you go and again I press GZ to move it up entirely. Okay, and using the connected proportion tool, I wanted not to affect any of the other edge loops like there, but that it affects this entire little ridge of my eyelid. Okay, so all of those 3 points I think at the moment, that it affects all of those. Okay, so move those up. Okay, so I'm just playing with I'm scrolling with my mouse wheel to set the proportional distance, okay, so that it does use all of those, or you can, well, you can probably just go and select all the points so you don't really struggle with it too much. Okay, and the same thing for these. So I move them up like this. Okay, and then if you have an eyeball in, which you probably should, then just to make sure that it's actually then going against your eyeball. Okay. I don't know why it's moving so much. Let me just turn it off again. Weird. Very, very weird. Okay, and I do normally use both or affect both. Oh, this is so. It's like super sensitive. But anyway, you get the point. Okay, so I tend to do that until I have a shape which I'm happy with for his opening of his eyes. Okay, somewhat like that. Okay, and that is all we really need to do there. Okay, so we need to open his eyes, we need to mirror whatever modifiers are on him, and then smooth them out again. Okay, so there we go. Okay, now getting back to our pose rig. Okay, back onto this dude. So I'm going to select just my mesh first. Okay, so whatever, if he's got eyes and teeth and a tongue and hair and earrings and whatever in his head, or any clothing at this point, I'm just going to work with the mesh first, as well as the actual rig itself. Okay, and how you go about doing this is you select the body. I don't know why I've got so many vertex groups on it at the moment. So I'm actually going to delete all my vertex groups. I'm not using any of them for any modifiers, so I can. So I'm just going to say delete all. Okay, and the trick now is to select the body, shift select the armature, and say Control P, and say armature deform with automatic weights. Okay, hopefully nothing breaks. Okay, now what that should have done is on your mesh itself, you will now have a modifier over there called armature, and it's parented, or the object, the rig or armature object it's referencing is the meta rig, which you can see there. So I just want to turn this off. Okay, and what that now means is if I go and select my armature and go into pose mode and I rotate any of these, it should affect my character somewhat. Okay, now you see how slow it is now? That is because my armature modifier is currently sitting on or below after my subsurf modifier. Okay, so it is now applying it to all the points that my subsurf modifier creates. Okay, whereas if I do it there, move it up, it's only applying to the points of the actual mesh. So now, if I go back to my armature, my pose rig, and I now rotate it, you can see it's ever so slightly more responsive. Okay, which is cool. So now we can, if we want to, we can now go and whatever pose we want to put him in, we can rotate him. It's also, it's not an actual physical rig, so we can, you know, it's a bunch of bones, so we can go and reposition them however we want. We can rotate them from wherever we want. We can, I don't know why this is so incredibly sensitive. You know, we can do whatever it is we want. Rotate the bones however you wish. Okay, so see, it's not a rig. Okay, it's really just a way that we can slightly easily just reposition our character if we want to. Okay, and my suggestion is, if you are going to do this, keep it simple. Don't go and try and put it in an elaborate pose. Just use it to try and refine it a little bit more if you wish to. Okay. Okay. Then, if you are going to do that as well, what you do need to do is, if you have things like eyes and hair and all of that, which I do, you need to go and parent those to the head bone. Okay. So all of the other objects that I have, so his earrings, for instance, earrings, brows, eyes, hair, nose, bone thingy, teeth. Just turn actually body off. Teeth. I think that's everything. Okay, and then we need to go and shift. Well, we need to parent it to the head bone itself. So that bone over there. Okay. The easiest way to do it is if you're in pose mode and you have that bone selected, then you go and, no, it's not easy. How do you? Okay, there we go. So you have everything selected, select the bone, go into pose mode, select the bone again, and then say Control P, and this time you just say parent to bone. Okay, so now if you're in pose mode and you rotate this bone, then all of those objects should go with. Okay, so if you are then repositioning your character's head, then the rest of these goodies will come along. Okay, so all of these, obviously we can do whatever it is that we want with, but I'm going to leave it more or less just how it was. Okay, we can maybe rotate the arms down a bit or something. So we can maybe just do that. And then you could go and weight paint it to go and correct any things that break if you really want to. It's slightly slow, but it's also not particularly a very good trick. Okay, anyway, so I'm going to leave it like that. I'm going to leave it in object mode, and now my character is ready for the turnaround. Okay, so I'm quickly going to race through the turnaround render again. Okay, so step one of the turnaround render is actually to turn our character around. Okay, so regardless of if you are using the metric or not, okay, what we need to do is, or what I do, is I create an empty object, a plain axis, okay, and make sure that that is at the center of your scene over there. Okay, or see, my character's in the center of the scene, but his feet are actually so small and far back. So we can potentially just move it a little bit back to the ball of his foot so that it looks like he's rotating around his own pivot, which is probably a better idea. Okay, anyway, so I'm going to put it over there. Then that is the object that we're actually going to turn around. Okay, so I'm going to go to my first frame, which is frame 1. Okay, so frame 1. Okay, and I'm going to key its rotation. So you can press I to insert a frame, and I'm going to go down to the rotation option over there. So it's going to add a key on rotation, and then I'm going to scrub all the way to frame 100, and I'm going to do the same thing. Okay, but now I'm going to actually turn around, and the easiest way for me to do that is to go either hold in Control and rotate it by 360 degrees, which you can see in the top left hand corner of the viewport. There we go. Okay, and key the rotation there again, and there we'll have an object which is turning around. Okay, which is fine. Let's just set the length of our scene to 100 frames long, which is more than long enough. Okay, so there we go. That's 100 frames, and it's turning around. Now, all of my objects are currently moving along with my metric, except for the script. Okay, so if I go and select everything that is not moved along with metric and parent those things to my empty, and say Control P. If you say keep transforms, it's just a safer way to do it. Often, if you parent an object that already has keyframes on it, it can jump around, and saying keep transform is one way to make sure that that doesn't happen. So now, if I go and do that, then my character is going to rotate. Okay. I already have a camera in my scene, which is basically just looking at my character. So now, if I look in from there, he is now going to rotate. Okay. However, one thing that I happen to know, because I've done this before, I just want to turn on the simplify button over there and just 0 and 0, just to make this a little quicker. Okay, I know it's broken, but don't worry about it. Okay, now if I were to play this, you'll see he speeds up into the turn and then slows down. So if we loop it, like you can see now, it's going to have this little stop in the whole time, which isn't cool. We want just a thing perpetually turning. Okay, and the reason why that's happening is by default these keyframes are set to a Bezier interpolation. So if I go into my graph editor, you'll see. Okay, so this is the actual rotation on the z-axis, this blue one. Okay, and it is starting, it's easing into that, and then it's maintaining more or less constant speed, and then it's slowing down again. And we don't want that. What we want is it to just be constant. So if I select the keys So I'm pressing A to select everything, and then going to press T so that I can set the keyframe interpolation. You can also do it by going to the key button over there and saying interpolation mode over there and saying linear. Okay, now if we play it, he's just going to spin at a constant speed all the way around, which is better. Okay, great. Now if you want to get really technical, since he's going from 0 to 360 or minus 360, that frame 1 and frame 100 is exactly the same. So there will be like a loop frame if you then loop it, but I mean, you can then render it out to 99 if you really want to, but I don't even worry about that. Generally speaking, spinning so slowly you shouldn't see it. But anyway, moving on. Cool, so now our character's turn. He's in his final pose. Now all that we need to do is, well, set it up and render it out. So this is basically what we did last week, but I'm just going to go through it a little bit quicker and just get through and hopefully put everything into After Effects so we can see. Okay, so firstly, I don't want to render out a background. Okay, so remember I showed you the two options last week. One was like a studio setup with an infinity curve and whatever, and the other was using a three-point lighting setup. Regardless, you don't need to render out a background. Okay, what we can do in the very least is create a floor plane. Okay, so I'm just making a new plane, which is on the floor. I'm just making it fairly big. Okay, and that I'm setting just to be a shadow catcher object. Okay, so if I go down to that button over there, and go down to cycle settings, okay, and click shadow catcher, whatever I render out now, this is only going to render out shadows. Okay, so I'm just going to call that shadow plane. Okay. Okay, so again, however we choose to render it out with whichever lights, this should be good enough. Okay, so now I'm going to go, and I still like the lighting that our studio lights give us. Okay, and you can use the three-point lighting setup as well. The only thing I find about the three-point lighting setup is that the shadows on the ground plane tend to be more all over the place. So I'm going to go and add in my area lights and do pretty much the same as what we did last week. Okay, so I'm having one area light from the top. I'm going to look at this in rendered mode. Sorry, that's just something which I said earlier, just now. Okay, so one light from the top. So you can see my ground plane is there. Currently my character doesn't have any material on, so I'm just going to quickly just drop on a principled shader that's like a neutral gray color, just so we can clearly see what's happening. Okay, so this I'm going to just set to be a little bit bigger, so say, and also I'm going to set it to be slightly from the front and render at a bit of an angle. Okay, now my environment color is blue at the moment, which I don't want, so I'm just going to turn that off for now, so you can only see the lighting or the effect of our lighting itself. So let's turn off the visibility of the meteor because we don't need that, and that's probably a little bit too gray. Okay, so step one. Maybe a little bit too much. There we go. Okay, something like that. If we will adjust all the strengths and everything just now. Okay, then I want one from the side. I'm going to reset the rotation and rotate it up at 90 degrees like that. Put it over there. Make sure it's more or less next to him. Okay, and just so that I can have this symmetrical, not that it needs to be, but just so that I can. I'm just going to set this to be -8, so the actual whole numbers, and that to be 2. Okay, now I'm going to duplicate that one. Okay, rotate it 180 degrees. Make sure that's at 8 at 2, so it's the same. Okay, so there we have our basic lighting. Okay, now we can obviously go and increase the strengths of everything a little bit more. So this one I'm going to like double it and see what that does. Don't like the shadows so very big, So maybe if I make this a little bit bigger, softer, okay, and then increase the strength of these maybe. Not maybe 1,000, maybe 500. And then what I did last time, which I liked, is just giving it a bit of a tint in its color. Okay, so I said the one I like to have slightly warmer, just as a nice little studio setup idea, and slightly colder, just ever so slightly. I don't want it to be blue and red, I just want it to have something to it. Okay? Which doesn't look too bad. Okay, so that's, I'm going to leave it there. I'm just going to pull these lights a little bit more forward. Yeah, and that one. Okay, that's better. So I don't really want any like serious shadows on the front of the character. Okay, and if I turn off my simplify quickly, then I can see what that looks like. Where's simplify? Okay, give that a second. Okay, so that I think isn't terrible. Okay, so that was the one option, okay, remember? So those three lights I'm just going to drop into a new collection. So M on my keyboard, new collection, and call those studio lights. Okay. Okay, then the other option, remember, is to create, again, I'm going to make them, you can even use some lights for them, it's not too important. So this is more like a 3-point lighting setup again. So a key light, which is more or less in that direction. Okay. Where's that one? Let's call it key. Make it a bit stronger. Okay. Then I'm going to duplicate that, reset its rotation. I'm just going to pull it back so that I know where it is, and have it come from slightly a rear angle, and maybe slightly from a side angle. Okay, and that I'm going to call my rim. Okay. So obviously the bigger you make them, the softer the effect of that rim light's going to be. Okay. And then I'm just going to move this 7 there, more or less, so I can see what it is. Okay, and then I just want to have another one, which is my, my full light. Okay, now again with the strength, so I don't want my full light to be super strong. Okay, so strength maybe 5, just so that I don't have any like hectic shadows. The rim light can be quite strong, I think. So let's make that slightly stronger than the front light, and then the key is that one. Okay, so just what they're each doing individually is the rim does that. Okay, the key light does that, and then the full light does that a little bit. Okay, now what I am noticing is that because this is coming from a lower angle, I have like the shadow over there, and that's the ground plane that is actually doing that. So I can turn that off if I go into the object settings and the ray visibility settings here. If I turn off the shadow, it won't cast shadows onto our character, okay, which is ideal. Okay, so then with those three on, we get that kind of effect, which is also not bad. Okay, even though we do have that giant shadow over there, it's not the end of the world. Okay, so I actually prefer this. However, I don't like its shadow very much. Maybe if we just soften up our key light, we'll get a less hectic shadow. It just goes on forever. A little less. Somewhat like that. Okay, anyway, if we really want to, we can get rid of this front shadow on our rim light, so we can just turn off the shadow casting of our rim light. So we can just say don't cast shadows, so that that doesn't happen. And with our full light, potentially. Don't cast shadows. And then, just want to see something. I've never known what this multiple importance does, but some people say it does reduce fireflies and that kind of thing. I don't know. Okay, but anyway, as far as lighting goes, I'm pretty much happy with that. Okay, so I'm just going to again make this shader a little bit darker again. Okay, so we have something like that. Remember, we aren't rendering out the background at all. Okay, so that's not a problem. I'm more or less happy with what it looks like, I think. As long as we can clearly see the contrast in the character, then we're fine. Okay, so we don't want to overlight it to the point where we can't see any detail, because obviously then what's the point? So maybe we can even drop the intensity of this fill a little bit more. Just like that. Okay, and something like that should be cool. Okay, I'm going to just give the same material to my other objects. I will, just for contrast's sake, leave the eyes without the material on so that those stand out a little bit more. So here I'm just going to call this one gray. Okay, gray, and then those I'll give the same gray to. Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can go and do it if you want. And then my leaf. Okay. So somewhat like, something like that should be fine. Okay, now to actually go and render it out. Okay, remember what I said last time. We need to have this version of it, so a lit version, then a wireframe version as well, and then a checkerboard version so we can see the UVs. Okay, now what I've done already is at the bottom over here, I've just made two spheres with, there, okay. So one sphere has a white material on, which is just a white emission shader, okay. So these I've already just set up quickly. So going to my shader editor over there, you can see literally just a white emission plugged into the output. And then this is our checkerboard material, which is also an emission shader with a checkers shader and the UV plugged into that. This is actually unnecessary. That won't make a difference. Okay, so I have these set up as materials in my scene on different objects. Okay, but what I'm going to do is say now we're basically ready to render out our turnaround. So this is now our grayscale turnaround. So if we now pull this around, it will think and update, and we'll have our character turning. Okay. So we can render this out, and then our gray version would be done. Okay, so just with regards to that, in our output, wherever we go and save this, so I've got a folder here, so I'm just going to make a new folder and say turn around render. Okay, in there, I'm going to make a new folder called gray, and in there I'm going to save this, so character gray, and then leave that just with an open underscore, so that when it saves the frame number after that. Okay, now things that we need to make sure are checked on over here. Firstly is our file format, which is set to PNGs. RGBA needs to be checked on so we actually get an alpha channel out of this because we don't want the background. Okay, and the color depth and the compression you can leave as it is. Okay, now what I also do generally is I leave this overwrite off. Okay, and that means that if you're rendering on more than one computer, or if you start and stop your renders, then that's not going to overwrite something that's already been written. Okay, so say now you start your render one night and the power goes off. You start it again the next day. All you have to do is say render again, and because that override button is off, it's not going to overwrite the frames you've already done. Okay, so I'm going to save this, save as a. Okay, now this has never been very elegant in Blender, or at least I don't know about it. Gray turn around. Okay, so I'm going to save the version that is just the gray turn around. Okay, now what we can also do now is we basically then need to render out a checkerboard one. Okay, and to do that, I already have that sphere object down there somewhere with the checkerboard material on it. Okay, so what I can do is if I go into that button over there, the view layer button, there's an override, okay, which you can basically give a new material to everything in your scene, just about. So if I go in there and select my checker, okay, it's now going to do that. So it's going to then go and apply that checkerboard material to my whole character, okay, and it also renders particularly quickly. So for instance, if I, oh sorry, the one thing, just make sure in your render settings, before you render anything out, that this transparency, where to go, film? Under film, the transparency is on, okay? Otherwise, you're not going to get a transparent background, even if you have selected RGBA. Okay, so that needs to be on. Okay, now, just to show you that this does render quite quickly, you could even capture this out if you really wanted to. 12 and render that, it is really going to render quite quickly. Okay. Also, on this pass and the wireframe pass, we don't need the shadow anymore because we already have that. So all we want is just the emission version of this material on our character. Okay, that. Okay, that's what we need. Okay. So again, just to make sure it's actually gone and applied, since it's a material override on the whole scene, we don't even get the shadow material out anymore, which is actually in our favor. So all we've done is just applied this material, and then we can render this one out. Okay. Then for the wireframe version, I'm going to do it now just with still frames, and then stick it in After Effects and just blend it all together just to show you. But just so that you know, for the wireframe version, what we need to do there is, first of all, instead of having the checker version over there, I'm going to swap that for my white one. Okay, so it's just a white frame. Okay, and then to get our actual wireframe, like we figured out last week, what we have to do is we use the freestyle rendering, so it's like the cartoon line rendering thing. So this freestyle rendering, okay, we need to, first of all, I'm just gonna turn that on. Okay, turn that on. Okay, then on any object that we want this wireframe to render out on, okay, we need to mark their edges as freestyle edges. Okay, so for the body, I'm going to go into edit mode, and that's why my edges are all green. Okay, select all the edges, select all character, say Control E, or go into the edge menu over there and say mark freestyle edge. Okay, so on all the objects that you want your wireframe to render out on. Okay, then once you've done that, since it's been activated over here in the next panel, next panel, here we go, we have now these freestyle line options, okay? And all we want to do over there is in this freestyle line set menu, okay? we want to disable everything over here and only have edge mark active. Okay, so that means it's only going to render out our freestyle lines on our edges that we've selected. Okay, and then the last thing, if we go down to this line style, we have a thickness option there, and I have it set to 1. Okay, now if it's set to 1 over here, and it's set to 1 over here, then we should get a line that is 1 pixel thick. Okay, so for now, if I now render it out, what it's going to do is, firstly, it's going to apply my, where's my override button? There we go. It's going to apply my white material to everything, so it's going to be white. And then it's going to render out my freestyle lines on top of that. Okay, so if you just give that a moment, it's going to render out the white very quickly because that doesn't take much thinking at all. Okay, and then on top of that, it's going to think for a bit. And I think it's thinking because of the hair that's confusing it. So normally this wouldn't take as long. But once it now freestyle visibility computations, it's going to think about that for a second. Now it's actually rendering it out, and then it's going to pop in once it's done. There. Okay, so you see, I've added it on everything except my eyeballs. Okay, because I don't think you need them on your eyeballs. Okay, so now I'm going to save this frame quickly. Save as. I'm going to go into my turnaround render. I'm going to have made 2 extra folders, so I'll have a wire folder and a UV folder. Okay, so in my wire one, this is my wire. So I'm only going to compute with the still frame. You guys are going to render out your entire 100 frames of that. Okay, so I'm going to render out that one. And what you can do, remember we saved it now as a gray version. With this set up, we can now save a wireframe version and then also save the checkerboard version. Okay. Just so that we don't break anything that we've done previously and we know what's rendering later. Okay, then to get my checkers again, I'm just going to put my checkerboard material back on. I'm going to turn off my freestyle line rendering because I don't want that. And you see currently for these two, the wireframe and the checkerboard, my samples, I've only set them to be on 32. Okay, it's really small. I mean, they shouldn't, you shouldn't really need any fancy detail for them at all. Okay, which means these 2 passes render relatively quickly. And the last one happened in 40 seconds. Okay, now, just one observation. Okay, since I've unwrapped this before I applied my mirror modifier and then deleted half of it and then mirrored it again, I've mirrored my UVs, but generally you guys would unwrap it after you've done all of that so you don't have mirrored UVs. So just be aware of that. Okay, so I'm going to save this. So image, save as, select it to go, checker. Okay, and then I'm just going to render out an actual version with everything in. So then my actual gray one, my gray one, if I delete that again, I should now have, let's just make sure, a rendered version. Okay, great. So that one I'm going to render, but I'm going to make sure that the samples for my gray version are a little bit higher. Okay, that's very low. Now, just in terms of render sampling and stuff, generally speaking, like to get a very, very decent production, probably standard render, you'd set them to 1,000. You can normally get away with a lot less than that. For this, I don't know, depending on how grainy your final thing is, I'm guessing like 128 should be fine, but let's see. Okay, so that's what you're rendering. Okay, now in After Effects, just quickly, you are going to then import your 3 image sequences. Okay, so you're going to have 100 frames of each. Okay, so I'm just going to have my checker and my wireframe. I'll actually render this out, and with this video, I'll upload just in the end what the final thing should look like so you guys can see. And then we're just waiting for that. Okay, now just some maths. It's going to be a 4-second turnaround. Okay, so it's 100 frames at 25 frames per second, which is going to go from gray to wireframe to UV. Okay, so that loop should then be 12 seconds. Okay, so we can go, or what, 300 frames, I think. Okay, so we can make a new composition in After Effects. Okay, at the same frame rate that, or resolution that we're rendering out, 25 frames per second, and you can type in here. It must be full. You can type in here either the second values, so 12, or you can type in 300. 12 should be fine. Is this thing done yet? Okay. You can also, I didn't do it now, but it's not a terrible idea, turn on the denoising feature, which will get rid of some of your noise. It'll just smooth it out a little bit, but be careful, because sometimes if you use it incorrectly, it can also result in like flickering and stuff. Okay, so this I'm gonna zoom through. Okay, so let's save this quickly. Image save as gray. Okay, now After Effects in 20 seconds. Bring in your gray one. Okay, that's going to be a gray one, and I'm just going to drag that in. Yours will be, you'll have to loop it 3 times. Okay, so after 4 seconds, you will have to go and do that kind of, well, not cut them, but you will have that to make it loop. Okay, which you can see mine is rotating now 3 times. Okay, and since if your picture over there in the top left-hand corner doesn't have that alpha channel, then you've either not activated the RGBA button, or your film transparency isn't on. Okay, so be aware of that. That's very important. Okay, so that means we can go and put in a whatever, a background color. Okay, so there's our character on a bit of a, with his shadow. Okay, so there's our 3 times he turns. Okay, but we want over here it to be checkerboard, and over there it to be wireframe, or wireframe checkerboard. It doesn't matter which one you do which, as long as all 3 are there. Okay, so yours will also be, they will match up, that they will be the same length, because they're all 100 frames long. Okay. Okay, now what you'll see there is that's going to happen, but we don't want that. We still want our shading on it, so we're going to set the checker and the wireframe just to use a blending mode, so we can see what works best. But we can say either multiply, and then we'll get the multiply on top of that, or you can say screen, or add, and you'll get a lighter version of it. Okay, so I think for now multiply should be fine. So it's going to disregard the light values and only use the darker values to a certain extent, and the same for this guy. So if we multiply him, we'll get the wireframe on top of that. Okay, now the last thing, we don't want it just to like pop between these when it's turning. Okay, we'd like it to blend in nicely. Okay, the one thing you'll probably see is with the wireframe over there, since it hadn't rendered out the hair, the wireframe goes over the head a bit over there, but I'm really not too concerned about that. That's fine. Okay, where's it going? Okay, so the last thing I just want to do is I just want to blend these in between each other. Okay, so that they just fade in nicely. So all we need to do is just have this, our checkerboard, fade in to that point. So over here it's already faded in, and then fade out. Okay, and just go over here, 10 frames in, here over there, fade it out over there, and then the out point, have it be off, and 10 frames earlier have it be on. So it fades back to gray, and then the wireframe fades in again, which may be slightly more elegant. So off, key, 10 frames up, on, and then over here, 10 frames back, on, out, off. So that may be just neater, so we don't have them blending over each other, but again, it's up to you. Okay, that's it. Module 1 done. Okay, so I'll render this out and upload it along with this video so you guys can clearly see with the turning and everything, what it looks like. If there aren't any questions, you guys are welcome to go, and I'll see you guys on Thursday.